Reaching the halfway point of the year does not mean your plan needs to change. Happy Friday, everybody. Today is June 5th, 2026, and this is your Friday planning video. Now, as we move into June, we arrive at one of those natural checkpoints in the calendar. The halfway point of the year, and whether we realize it or not, that midpoint tends to create pressure. Pressure to evaluate everything, pressure to make adjustments, pressure to feel like if we're not changing something, we must somehow be falling behind. You see it everywhere this time of year. People revisiting their goals, reassessing their routines, questioning investment allocations, wondering if they should be doing more, changing more, fixing more. And while reflection is healthy, overreaction is not, because there's an important difference between a thoughtful review and an emotional reset. A mid-year check-in should not automatically trigger major changes. It should simply help confirm whether you are still aligned with the direction you originally intended to go. That's the real purpose of a check-in, not to reinvent the plan, not to chase what's already worked, not to compare yourself to everyone around you, but simply to pause long enough to ask, am I still aligned with my goals? That question creates clarity. The wrong question creates pressure, because many people approach this point of the year already assuming something must be wrong. If I haven't made dramatic progress, maybe I need a new strategy. If markets feel uncertain, maybe I should change direction. If someone else seems ahead of me, maybe I missed something. And suddenly the calendar itself becomes the reason for unnecessary change. I had a conversation recently with someone who felt exactly that way. They came into the meeting convinced that they needed to make multiple adjustments, not because anything had failed, not because their goals changed, not because their finances deteriorated, because we had reached June. The feeling was simple. Shouldn't I be doing something? And after reviewing everything carefully, the conclusion was actually very simple. Their plan was working. Their savings were consistent. Their long-term structure still made sense. Their risk level was appropriate. Their timeline had not changed. The only thing that had changed was the date on the calendar. And I think that happens more often than people realize. Sometimes the greatest source of financial stress is not an actual problem. It's the feeling that we should always be doing more. But progress in planning is not measured by how often you change your strategy. It's measured by how consistently you follow a well-designed plan over time. And consistency is difficult because it often feels less productive than action. Doing something feels productive. Changing something feels productive. Reacting feels productive. But in financial planning, unnecessary movement can create more damage than inactivity, because every adjustment introduces variables, new risks, new tax considerations, new emotions, new opportunities for second guessing. And many times the people who struggle the most financially are not the people without a plan. They're the people who continuously interrupt their own plan. One of the hardest disciplines in investing and planning is learning when not to act. That restraint matters, especially during periods where the news cycle constantly creates emotional pressures. One week, investors are worried about inflation. The next week, they're worried about rates. Then recession fears return. Then markets rally again. Then people feel like they missed it. In an environment like that, people can begin confusing activity with progress. But thoughtful planning is rarely emotional. It's structured, measured, intentional. And sometimes the best financial decision you make all year is deciding not to make unnecessary changes. It doesn't mean adjustments are never appropriate. Of course they are. Life changes, income changes, family situations change, health changes, retirement goals evolve, business considerations and conditions change. When meaningful changes happen, your plan should adapt accordingly. But those decisions should come from substance, not from the emotional pressures of reaching a midpoint on the calendar. A good mid-year review is actually fairly simple. Ask yourself a few important questions. Are my goals still the same? Has my timeline changed? Has my risk tolerance material changed? Am I still saving consistently? Am I spending intentionally? Am I making emotional decisions based on headlines or comparisons? Those are productive questions. And many times after going through that process carefully, the answer becomes, I actually do not need dramatic changes right now. And there's tremendous value to that realization. Because confidence does not come from constant movement. It comes from clarity. It comes from knowing why you're doing what you're doing. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about successful planning is that it requires constant optimization. It really does not. Long-term success is usually built through steady behavior, repeated consistently over time. The fundamentals are often surprisingly simple. Spend less than you earn, save consistently, manage risk appropriately, avoid emotional decisions, stay disciplined through uncertainty, allow time to work. None of that sounds exciting, but boring consistency is often what creates meaningful long-term results. And honestly, this applies far beyond investing. Think about health. Most people don't get healthier because of one dramatic week. They get healthier because of consistent habits repeated for years. Same is true in relationships, in parenting, in business. And the same is true financially. Consistency compounds, not just money. Behavior. That's why mid-year reviews should focus less on dramatic reinvention and more on honest alignment. Are you moving in the right direction? If yes, then your role may not be to accelerate. It may simply be to continue. And there is maturity in that. There's wisdom in recognizing that discipline often looks quieter than emotion. Sometimes staying steady is harder than reacting, but staying steady is often exactly what creates the outcome you want in the first place. As we head into the second half of the year, I think this is an important reminder. You do not need to manufacture change simply because the calendar suggests it. You do not need to overhaul a plan that's already working, and you do not need to compare your progress to everyone around you. Your plan should reflect your goals, your priorities, your timeline, your life, not the emotional pace of the world around you. So before making adjustments this month, pause first. Review carefully, think intentionally, and ask the right question. Not what should I change, but am I still aligned with where I want to go? Because if the answer to that is yes, then the most productive thing you may do this summer is continue following the plan you already built thoughtfully in the first place. A mid-year check-in should confirm your direction, not force unnecessary change. Have a great weekend.